Using food as a reward to train your dog is probably the easiest way to condition behaviors and make your dog learn what we want him to learn. The reason for that is because all animals need to eat to stay alive, and the desire for food is the greatest desire we have, right? The desire to reproduce sexually and desire to stay alive through eating is a great drive to keep us going. The reason I like using food in training dogs is because it's a real fair way for us to, one, build a bond with the dog. So I always say when you first get a dog, hand feed the dog. Hand feed, hand feed, hand feed, because the dog sees two things. One, that you're providing something nutritious, good, and that will keep the dog alive. And two, it puts you hierarchically in a much stronger position to the dog, right? So if you have food in a dog's mind, you went out, killed the animal, brought it back, and are providing for the other dogs, which therefore makes you a higher level person or animal in the pack. Because it would be the dominant dogs that would go out, they would be able to kill, the stronger dogs would kill, would bring the food back. So using food as training allows us to lure and shape behaviors that we otherwise would have to do through spatial pressure or through body pressure. If we can use a food item, first of all, we want to make sure that the food is something the dog likes. People always say to me, well, how do I know if the dog is gonna, my dog doesn't like treats. Well, you haven't found the right treats, right? We all like food, but if you give me some kind of food I don't like, I might not eat it. And you can't to that question then say, well, Robert doesn't like food. No, he doesn't like that food, right? But he might like other food. So to get the dog to like the food, we might need to do a little bit of research, right? We might need to use some jerky treats. We may need to use some cookies. We may need to use some raw meat, or we may need to use some hot dogs or string cheese or anything like that. We need to find out what the dog likes to get him to enjoy that. Be consistent with what you give your dogs, especially if you're in a shelter environment training dogs, because if you mix it up a lot, you're going to have dogs that get the runs, and that's messy. But if you can be consistent on a food like a good lamb and rice jerky, a chicken jerky, a beef jerky, if you really have a dog that needs help, hot dogs. Hot dogs are a great way to train dogs. When you use treats, you're doing a couple things. One is, when you use a toy, you have an interaction with a dog, whether you're playing tug or fetch. So the dog performs, I lure him, he performs the act I wanted him to perform, then he plays with the toy. What happens there is there's a disconnect from the obedience, right? So the dog takes a break to go chase the ball, bring the ball back, and then maybe he wants to play keep away or whatever. That's going to inhibit my ability to repeat the exercise again. With food, conversely so, he ingests the food, swallows the food, and immediately looks for more food, and therefore he looks to repeat the behavior that I'm asking him to do, right? So using small amounts of treat, and I say small, tiny amounts of treat, keeps the dog engaged to me, keeps him focused to me, builds a good relationship with me, and allows me to lure, shape, and repeat exercises that I want the dog to repeat, right? Real simple, real simple. So all the treats we use should always be dispensed from a treat pouch. They should be put away somewhere so the dog can't find them. If you keep them in your hands, the dog's going to keep targeting your hand. But if it's in a treat pouch, the dog has to look to the treat pouch to get the reward, and the treat pouch should be in the center of our body. So he's kind of looking at us, not at our hands. I can take the treat into the hand, lure the dog, and get the dog to perform what I want him to do. When you use treats with dogs, it's consistent. My treats are like your treats, or like your treats. The dog will repeat the behavior, and later we can fade away the treat. So whenever somebody says, well, the dog will only do what I want him to do with treats, well, then you haven't finished the training, right? When you finish the training, you ask the dog to perform the task at hand, and then reward the dog afterwards. You're not luring the dog anymore. There's a breakdown of how to train a dog with treats. The first part of it is holding the treat, luring and shaping the movement. The second thing is adding a behavior onto it, or a word onto it, so that the dog knows when I say this, you do this movement, then you get the treat. Then there's no treats at all, and I just use a verbal, and I give the dog a reward. But there's always a reward for performing an action in any kind of training, right? Whether it's praise, compulsion, or food or toys, A dog is always being rewarded for doing the right thing. And because they're being rewarded, they desire to do the right thing. And when we look at it from a compulsion standpoint, because they're not being punished, they want to do the right thing. But as I said before, dogs that are trained with motivation or balanced training are more likely to be well-trained, well-balanced, well-performing dogs than dogs that are trained with compulsion or the avoidance of pain. If I tell you to do something and you better do it or I'm going to kick your ass, you're going to do it under duress. If I tell you to do something and when you finish it, I'm going to give you a big prize, you're going to do it with joy. Dogs are just like humans in that sense. They always seek to avoid pain and to pursue pleasure, just like we do, like all animals do. And if you desire that, then you're going to do better with food. So the food keeps the dog coming back for more. If the pieces are small, the dog's not going to get full, and you can repeat over and over and over again over a good duration. And it keeps the dogs from gaining weight by keeping the food small. We don't want to unhealthily influence the dog. So some dogs are less food motivated than others. People say, well, my dog won't work for food. Well, then your dog won't work at all because he has to eat. So if a dog is in the wild and he desires not to hunt the rabbit, he's just not going to eat and he's going to die. So at some point, his desire to eat will outweigh his stubbornness of not liking that food or his stubbornness of not performing that task that you're asking him to perform. You need to find what the dog likes, you need to find out the time he's most hungry, and you need to find out the fashion in which to dispense it that will inspire him the most to repeat it. And that can be through luring and shaping, it can be through jackpotting rewards, little pieces and then a big jackpot. But using the food will instill a really solid relationship with your dog. It'll make him want to be near you because you're providing for him. And you might want to do it before you feed him. I always say, don't do training with a dog after they eat because it's backwards in their minds. You know, if as a person, it's the opposite. If I give you $500 and say, hey, can you come paint my house? You'll say, yeah, I'll come paint my house. But in the back of your head, you're saying, well, I already got the $500. But if I say, come paint my house, and when you're done, I'll give you $500, you're going to say, well, let me get this job done so I get my reward. Dogs function the same way. We want to inspire the dog, we want to carry the dog through the action, and we want to reward the dog when we're done. Okay? And if you like this video, there's a lot more. Click on the playlist up here and give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel.